So good afternoon to all again. This is the session 3 of the second Southeast Europe and East Med conference. This is Angelos Athanasopoulos again, Editor-in-Chief Politics from Newsweb Vima in Athens, Greece. Our session is called US Commitment to the Western Balkans. I would like to welcome 3 very good friends and analysts. First of all, Deputy Assistant Secretary at the Bureau of Europe and Eurasian Affairs at the US State Department, Mr. Matthew Palmer. Sir, nice to see you again and talking to you.
Great to see you. Thank you very much.
Mr. Angelos Syrigos, first of all, a good friend, Associate Professor of International Law and Foreign Policy, and today an MP with the New Democracy Party in Athens. Mr. Syrigos, nice to see you again. And Mr. Daniel Vajdich, excuse me, sir, if I mispronounce your name, non-resident senior fellow and president to Yorktown Solutions in the Atlantic Council in the United States. So, time is short. I would like to start with the Deputy Assistant Secretary Palmer. Sir, you have 5 to 6 minutes at your disposal to present your views and your initial statement, and then I will give the floor to Mr. Syrigos and Mr. Vajdich. So, please, the floor is yours.
Terrific. Thanks to you. Thanks, as always, to the organizers of the Delphi Economic Forum for hosting this. You've had some outstanding speakers already, and I'm honored to be included among them. The consistent United States vision for the Western Balkans across successive administrations, Democratic and Republican, has been and will remain centered on a region at peace with itself and its neighbors, a region that is stable, prosperous, and integrated into the European family of nations, European institutions, and Euro-Atlantic institutions. This means membership in the European Union for all, and NATO membership for all those who aspire to join and make the reforms that are necessary in order to do so. What gives me hope is that this is not just the vision of the United States for the Western Balkans. It is nearly indistinguishable from what our European allies and partners also want. And even more promising is that it is a vision explicitly articulated by the countries of the Western Balkans themselves. This common vision is our collective strength. Despite the challenges of a global pandemic, 2020 has seen some positive progress, results of our collective strength. The June 5th electoral reform agreement in Albania, facilitating an agreement to hold the first elections in Mostar in a dozen years. In March, we welcomed North Macedonia in as the 30th member of the NATO alliance, some short 3 years after we welcomed Montenegro as the 29th. We welcome the appointment of Miroslav Lajcak and applaud the EU and Croatia hosting the successful Zagreb summit in May. We also welcome the Commission's economic and investment plan aimed at mobilizing over 9 billion euros to spur economic growth throughout the region, and its commitment to ensure that the fast flow of essential goods through the region's green lanes is expanded to include the European Union. For our part, we expanded our investments in the region through the International Development Finance Corporation, the DFC office in Belgrade. It is important that US-EU coordination is robust on finance and energy projects, and that our commitment to ensure the growth across the region is maintained and sustained. One of the year's most significant decisions was the one made by the EU to open accession negotiations with North Macedonia and Albania. It's important that this moves forward. It was a reset for the region, putting all of our efforts into making the region a significantly better place. And it served to counter the false narrative and insidious doubt propagated by our geopolitical competitors that the Western Balkans, no matter how much progress they make on reforms, will never be fully integrated into the European Union. However, I know 9 months later, I know that many of you share our disappointment with the further delays in opening the years-long accession negotiations for Albania and North Macedonia. And I cannot emphasize enough how absolutely essential it is that the EU maintains an open door for the Western Balkans. Prospects for accession need to be tangible, achievable, and progressing. The United States and the EU are tremendously invested in securing a stable, peaceful, prosperous region, and this requires full European integration. The countries of the Western Balkans need to meet our shared transatlantic standards, and the United States remains committed to partnering to help them do that. But the EU's strongest incentive has been and will remain the accession process. The United States has a voice, and we will use it to encourage positive movement between North Macedonia and Bulgaria. Finally, and given today's events, I'll end for now by noting Greece's role as a pillar of stability in the Balkans and the Eastern Mediterranean, and a vital partner bolstering the region's security and prosperity, particularly the energy sector, but in other areas as well. Greece's strong support for the Euro-Atlantic aspirations of North Macedonia and Albania are most welcome, as is its increased outreach to Kosovo. Over the past 4 years, the United States and Greece have worked together to redraw the energy map of Southeast Europe. This is no small feat, and these positive developments mean that Europe and its neighbors will have a choice of where their energy comes from, what type of fuel they will use, and the route for delivery. Having options mean nations cannot be coerced to act against their own interests. Much of this progress was unlocked by the Prespas Agreement and renewed Greek attention to a region that welcomes a significant role for Greece and Greek business. We're on the cusp of doing more together than ever before, and I'm excited to see what the next year holds in store. Thanks again for this opportunity, and I'm very much looking forward to the conversation. Regards from Washington.
Thank you so much. Mr. Syrigos, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot. First of all, I would like to thank the organizer of the Economic Forum for the opportunity to participate in this forum with so important speakers. Back in the 80s, when Greece entered the European Union, the EEC as it was at that time, if we were seeing the maps of the EEC, Greece was an island to the east of Western Europe with no borders to the north. Then, after the end of the war, we discovered the existence of Balkans, and Balkans became synonymous with the worst dreams of the First and the Second World War. Then we changed the name and we called the area Southwestern Europe. We thought that if we baptized it with a different name, it would give us the opportunity to see it from a different angle. Then today, at the end of the day, we use the word expression Western Balkans, which describe the area which is the most problematic of all Balkans. I believe that we have two problems now with this. The one is political and has to do with the fight between the Serbian and the Albanian element. After the NATO intervention in 1999, the element feels that it has triumphed in the area, whereas the Serbian element feels humiliated. And as long as this continues, it is difficult to have real peace in these lands. The second problem, I believe, has to be faced as soon as possible by the European Union and the United States, has to do with the organized crime groups. If I remember well, there was a report last July by the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime, which described that the crime gangs from the Western Balkans have expanded in Latin America, in Western Europe, in Turkey, and they become key international players which manage to interfere with politics, to influence politicians, and this is something that we have to see in the near future, because quite often you have the feeling that you do not speak with the politician, but with the gangs who are behind him. This is more evident in areas like Albania and Montenegro, but you can see it in the whole area, and especially Kosovo. So I believe this is the first thing that we'll have to do in the near future. Try to face and stop all these crime gangs which try to control politics. Integration to NATO and to the European Union offers stability in the area, and this is a common target that we have to follow in the near future for all the countries of the area. 3 minutes and 30 seconds. Thanks.
So, thank you so much. And now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Vajdich. Please, sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and thank you to Delphi for organizing this important conference. The incomplete Euro-Atlantic integration process in the Western Balkans does leave the region vulnerable to external non-Western actors. But I would argue that the primary entry point for these actors, especially Russia, is the unresolved relationship between Belgrade and Pristina. While China can offer and does offer certain state-to-state commercial engagement that may seem attractive in the short term, Russia actually has very little to work with in the Western Balkans. It curries favor with based on certain, historical events and phase, and it obviously has relationships that it uses with the Orthodox churches in the region. But Moscow's actual clout, economically, militarily, is minimal. Rather, it's the unresolved relationship between Belgrade and Pristina that really gives Moscow its only real point of leverage in the Western Balkans. Serbia's leading political actors are compelled to cooperate with Moscow up to a certain point in order, from their perspective, to maintain Moscow's veto against Kosovo's membership at the UN. And what they're trying to do is buy time for some sort of agreement with Pristina that would be acceptable to the Serbian electorate, or at least a portion of the Serbian electorate. As a result, Serbia is highly vulnerable to Russian pressure and quite frankly, blackmail. Serbia's actually recent vote at the UN is a case in point. Belgrade voted with Russia against a resolution condemning the militarization of Crimea, Ukraine's Crimea Peninsula. I talked to a number of Serbian officials about this, and they said, look, Russia tied our vote at the UN to their votes at the UN regarding Kosovo. We didn't have a choice, and this isn't our geopolitical orientation. But what's incredible is that Russia's pressure in Serbia is so intense that it causes Belgrade to make decisions that aren't consistent with its own policies. Serbia has reiterated its support for Ukraine's territorial integrity over and over again. And in reality, Belgrade views Russia's annexation of Crimea as undermining its own position vis-a-vis Kosovo. And this was made clear when then Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko visited Belgrade in 2018. So in order to remove Russia's only real point of leverage in the Western Balkans, we have got to normalize the relationship between Belgrade and Pristina. And we have to do it in a way that is, as Das Palmer has said, sellable in both Belgrade and Pristina. If it's not sellable internally, it won't happen. Regardless of the external incentives that the United States and Europe provide, and the status quo with respect to non-Western actors in the Western Balkans is going to persist or maybe even get worse.
Thank you so much, and you actually give me the opportunity to go back to Mr. Palmer and ask him a bit more about how a solution can be sellable to both Belgrade and Pristina, because we've seen lately some kind of competition between the United States and Europe on who's going to solve this difference first and who's going to solve it better. So do you think that we can now have the United States and the European Union joining forces and trying to solve this Belgrade-Pristina spat? And what are the main points of a sellable solution, in your opinion?
Sure. I mean, thanks for the question. I do think the whole narrative about U.S.-EU rivalry in the Serbia-Kosovo dynamic is overblown. We've actually been working quite well and quite closely together. We have been strongly supporting Miroslav Lajcak and his process. Miroslav and I speak regularly. We have met together with the leaders from both Serbia and Kosovo. Our support for him and his effort is clear. What it is that the United States has been doing in parallel on normalizing the economic relationships, I would argue, is broadly supportive of the EU efforts to reach an agreement on normalizing the political relationship. And I think that Miroslav Lajcak and his team would share that view. Going forward, we intend to stand shoulder to shoulder with our European partners in trying to move this forward. It's a tough dynamic right now. Certainly, normalizing the relationship between Belgrade and Pristina would reset the entire region, be a tremendous step forward. There is a lot of work to do in getting the countries from where they are to where they need to be. The divisions, the political divisions in Kosovo have complicated efforts for Kosovo to speak with a forceful, coherent, unified voice. We're hopeful that they can find sufficient common ground amongst themselves to empower their own negotiators in engaging in the Lajcak-led process. But we are committed to working with our European partners to advance the objective of a fully normalized relationship, ideally centered on mutual recognition.
Thanks so much. Mr. Syrigos, you are considered, and this is not only a compliment, one of the best experts on Turkey in Greece. We know about Turkey and the East Med and the Aegean, but we also have Turkey and the role that she aspires to play in the Balkans. I would like to ask you, what do you think of this role? And if you think that it's disruptive in various of the fronts existing in the Western Balkans, for example, in the Belgrade, Pristina, or elsewhere?
When AKP came to power in 2002-2003, they were seeing the Muslim populations, Muslim and Turkish populations in the Balkans as the best example of the Ottoman history. They were calling these elements, these populations, as elements of the Ottoman history. But during the last decade, they started interfering in another way with these populations. For example, the fact that they spent tens of millions of euros to build a mosque in Tirana, to build similar mosques in various areas in the Balkans. So that AKP does not consider these populations only from the historical point of view, but they are trying to influence present-day politics. And this is the most disturbing thing today with Turkey in the area. What I find very interesting is this fight with schools in elementary and secondary schools in Albania, in Tirana. There were some schools which were owned by people who belonged to the Gulen movement. During the last 3-4 years, Turkey is trying to undertake these schools, and there is a long fight, and there are the Albanian states to intervene into this conflict. What is happening in Tirana is similar to what is happening in Kosovo, what is happening in Moldova, for example, where they have similar schools in the area of the Turkish-speaking Gagauz in the south of the country. It happens in Kosovo. It happens in all over the places. And we have to be very careful with what Turkey does with political.
I think we lost Mr. Syrigos. No, he's back with us. You are back with us. Yeah. Please
Okay,
repeat your last sentence. Yes.
Yes, we have to be very careful with this radical Islam that Turkey promotes, not only in the Balkans, but generally in the whole area, in the Middle East, in the Arab Springs.
Thank you so much. Mr. Vajdich, the last question is for you. You gave a very interesting expose, a short expose a while ago about Russia's influence in the Western Balkans. And I was wondering, what do you think about China's effort to project mainly soft power in the Western Balkans? And if you think that it considers the same risk like Russia?
Well, I think it's a risk. It's a large risk, but it's a very different risk at this moment in time. I think it is primarily commercially driven at this point. The countries of the Western Balkans are obviously below the EU average economically in so many different ways, and are looking to upgrade their infrastructure and expand economically. It's a priority for all of them. And China, does provide certain terms and make offers in a commercial context to these countries that, private sector Western companies can't, or Western governments can't. But over the long term, the terms aren't so great. And I think the danger over the long term is that what is currently commercial becomes political over time, and that China does play a role that is similar to Russia in terms of inhibiting these countries' development politically as democracies, in terms of the rule of law, exploiting corruption, and things of that nature. We're just not seeing that right now, but that's the risk factor over the long term. And that's why it's very good that there is increasing cohesion in Europe, within the EU, and transatlantically between Europe and the United States when it comes to China, which needs to be applied to the Western Balkans as well.
So, I would like to thank Mr. Matthew Palmer. Said it was great to talking to you again. Mr. Angelos Syrigos for his intervention, and also Mr. Daniel Vajdich, especially for your excellent expose on Russia. And of course, I would like to thank the organizers for giving me the honor to both share this panel and also having the conversation a while ago with Mr. Conley. I would like to thank you all, and I wish happy holidays to all and a better 2021 for all of us.
Thanks, and same to you. Really do appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.